Yo, yo, yo. Testing, 1, 2, 3. Test, test, testes, 1, 2, 3. Yes, I need hecklers. Pardon me? No, this is very, very free-form heckling. All right. It is now 5 o'clock. Do you know where your Al is? All right. I'm going to get this started because I have some material here, and I know y'all want to get some dinner, and I want to get ready. Oh, shut up. I know. I come to the South, and all of a sudden I pretend I'm Southern. I'm actually from Cleveland, Ohio. I have been for all my life. But I have this weird habit of picking up accents and things no matter where I'm at. I'm a heck of a lot of fun in interesting groups of people. The presentation I'm going to, holy crap. Wow, that's awesome. Thank you, Keynote. But that's not the slide I wanted. Ah, there it is. The presentation I'm going to be giving today is entitled Creativity and Hacker Culture, subtitled The Role of Local and Hyperlocal Interaction. This is a presentation that I've been thinking about for basically as long as I've been attending HackerCons. Hyper, yes. There will be some buzzword bingo in here, but that's just because I have to admit, I'm actually a manager in my day life. Yes, I did not use the word synergy, I promise. But I'm actually an IT and facilities manager at a university in Cleveland, Ohio. And a number of years back, I started this thing called Nauticon because I was attending a lot of HackerCons like PhreakNIC, DEF CON, HOPE, SummerCon, a whole bunch of them. And pardon me? Rubicon. Woo! Rubicon. And I realized that there was a lot more going on at the event than what was being advertised. And a lot of the events themselves were, while they were being classified as HackerCons, there was a whole lot of other stuff going on that wasn't necessarily traditionally hacker-related, but was still very interesting. And in some cases, even more interesting than the content that was on the schedule that people were attending. So let's talk about some foundations here. For my presentation, when I refer to a HackerCon, I'm referring to it in its modern parlance, which means that we're not simply talking about computer security conventions, because I think a lot of those have grown up. Sex parties and ponies, yes. There are still a lot of traditional type of quote-unquote HackerCons. You have your DEF CON, you have your very stereotypical HOPE, you have all your very expensive events like Black Hat and CanSec West and all that other kind of great stuff that I'm in no way able to afford. But when I talk about cons, I'm talking about all these other different kind of events, because I wouldn't really consider PhreakNIC a pure HackerCon, and I think some of you may agree with me because of the aspects of like you have the anime room, you have all the social interaction, all the really great room parties, and pardon me? Yeah. So yeah. Now, not necessarily. I'm going to disprove you. And also, when I talk about these different types of conferences and these different types of localities, I'm going to refer to the megacons. Now, when I talk about a megacon, I'm thinking 5,000 plus people, HOPE, DEF CON, something that everybody knows about, the media knows about it, it's been done in the news, overdone, and is, for lack of a better word, somewhat played out. When I'm talking about regional events, PhreakNIC is a good example of a regional event, because you pull people from, Georgia. I came from Cleveland, Baltimore, D.C. area, and then you get to the local and hyperlocal. And when you get to this point, when you talk about local events, you're talking about maybe something specific to somebody, say, in Northeast Ohio, in my example, or in the Cleveland area, or in the New York area. And when I refer to hyperlocal, I'm referring to perhaps a neighborhood inside of a city. Now, once we get to that level of granularity, some people go, well, how does that relate to a HackerCon at all? And my proposal is that there are HackerCons going around all over the place, or there could be people just don't know that they exist yet or that it's possible. And from my personal perspective, as I said basically, I've been attending a lot of cons since about 2000. I got into it because I finally had money to go to attend these things, and I had a really good time. But I had a really good time, not necessarily in all the programming and functions. I had a really good time talking to people out when I used to smoke, out in the front of the building, or at a room party, or after a presentation where I decided to get up or say, that was bullshit. I can't believe I just spent 45 minutes of my life listening to that, and then somebody else next to me going, yeah, that was bullshit, and then we talk about for the next 3 hours why it was bullshit, and actually had some real value and some real knowledge and discussion that came out from that. And the other aspect that I'm going to touch upon is creativity. From my perspective, creativity is the one thing that really separates HackerCons from all the other events out there. I mean, you have sci-fi cons, you have anime cons, you have, stamp collector cons, you have people that, like to collect Zippos. The one thing that differentiates us from everybody else is that there's an added element of personal expression and creativity that I don't think a lot of the other events have. All right, so these are some of the questions that I'm going to hope to attempt to address. Is creativity impacted by event size? Do larger events mean that you're going to have more creativity or vice versa? If so, how does that impact everything? And what is the unique value that smaller events offer to people that attend them versus the larger events? Because there's a certain amount of there's a lot of resources that can be placed in larger events that smaller events can't have, and does that really make any difference or not? And also, how can we apply all the lessons that we're learning and talking about today to smaller events in our own area? Because I'm a firm believer that in order to really, make what we do here this weekend matter, you have to take it home with you and do something with it. It's a very challenging problem. And it's not necessarily one that's been solved, but it's one that needs to be addressed because that's, it really makes the time that you spend here useful in some way. And actually, you can learn and continue to grow from that. All right. So here's some of the benefits that I was just thinking about when I thought, okay, if I go to something like DEF CON, what about DEF CON is really great? What about DEF CON is fantastic? They have a lot of money. They have a lot of people resources. They can spend, $5,000, $10,000 on something and think nothing of it. They have a full company structure set up where people pull yearly salaries in order to make sure the event runs. So by that metric, DEF CON has the ability to provide for its attendees a lot of things that FreakNIC can't. Nice 4-color glossy programs, nice expensive hotels, huge convention spaces, the ability to fly in presenters from other countries, all these types of things. They also can take advantage of economies of scale. When you deal with small events, you deal with a very expensive per person rate, no matter how much you try to economize. FreakNIC, as far as I'm concerned, is one of the best values in all of the, in terms of HackerCons. What you get here for your money is an incredibly good value. Speaking as somebody who runs an event, not a con, for example, for us, takes between $65 and $70 per person to run. And if you don't pay that in your ticket, I pay that out of my American Express, my Discover, my MasterCard, and whatever else hasn't been declined yet. Larger cons can take advantage of all these big things. They can order, say, 1,000 cases of a beverage and give it away and pay only 12 cents for it, 12 cents a can or whatever. Also, the mega-cons tend to have a really specific focus. If you're going to DEF CON, you know exactly what it is you're going to get for the most part. You're going to get presentations, probably some of which have been, regurgitated and redone from Black Hat or somebody else. They're going to be specific about computer security or network security or some other aspect like that. It sells itself because they have a very good niche chosen. So it's really easy for them to brand themselves and to sell themselves to somebody who potentially wants to come to the event. And finally, they have a really large user base. I mean, anybody who's been to a really large HackerCon knows that there's just such a wide range of people and such a great amount of people that, you know, that is also a resource that the event can pull from simply to get the leverage it needs to accomplish, you know, economies of scale and all this other kind of thing. And finally, going along with all of that, there's so much mindshare and visibility for these events, it's hard to talk about them and not have somebody, specifically those who aren't in the community, know exactly what the event is about. I mean, I wasn't at DEF CON this year, which is a first for me in about 7 or 8 years, but, you know, immediately I knew about I forget what's her face, who tried to come in and infiltrate the con, and yeah, the reporter. I mean, it's silly from my perspective that she even tried that tactic, but I find it even funnier the fact that the event itself was such a target because she assumed she was going to find something at that event that chances are she wasn't going to find, because that really wasn't the purpose of the event. I'm convinced that, like, a lot of the halo of, you know, pseudonymity and things that surround events like DEF CON is really kind of bullshit, because there's 8,000 people there. You're going to be seen by, you know, more people than you could possibly count. So there's really no expectation there of releasing any really deep secrets or anything that really shouldn't be out in the open. DEF CON is essentially it's a really fun party. It's, you know, one of the better parties out there, but it's not the kind of place where you're going to find the kind of information that is, you know, really underground and is really hard to get a hold of. So now that we talked about some of the benefits of the bigger events, I'm going to try to see if we can pinpoint some of the benefits of smaller events. The one thing that really motivates me, especially for Nauticon, is the dedicated fan base. I mean, if I said Nauticon right now, how many people here would admit that they've been to one? A lot of people. And if anybody who's on our IRC channel knows, what is kind of the Nauticon battle cry? Nauticon! Nauticon! So you'll see that a lot. I mean, it's kind of funny where I'll go to events like PhreakNIC or Ohio Linux Fest, and I'll see somebody and like, oh my God, Nauticon! That was an awesome event. I had a really good time. Or I'll see somebody at Hope that I saw at PhreakNIC, and I'm like, oh God, I haven't seen you, you know, since PhreakNIC last year. How you doing? And there's people who are very dedicated to these events. I mean, this is the third year I've been to this particular one in a row, and I see a lot of the same people that perhaps I don't see at other cons, but they're here. And it's kind of nice to see them here because I know that they're supporting this event, they find something valuable in this event, and they're having a good time. So, you know, that's something that a lot of local events have that perhaps the bigger events don't. I didn't show up to DEF CON this year, and after it was over, I was like, you know, I didn't really miss it. You know, I had a good time at home. I would rather spend that same time and actually hang out with people in my local area and do something cool rather than flying all the way to Vegas and losing everything in my savings at the gambling tables instead of actually talking to people. Also, I'll argue that when you're at a smaller event, the graph of connections between people is a lot smaller. When you're at an event like DEF CON, if you're trying to find somebody that's into the same thing you are, it might be kind of a challenge to find that. But when you're at an event like PhreakNIC or Nauticon or some other smaller event, you are more likely to be able to talking to somebody, say outside, having a cigarette, or just, you know, at a room party, and say, well, I'm into XYZ, and you're next to somebody who says, oh yeah, well, I have a buddy who knows somebody who's also into that, or, you know, somebody will overhear that you're talking about that. And it's really easy to get to know almost everybody at the event. Once you get past about 300, 400, 500 people, that becomes increasingly more difficult, such that there's a lot more cliques that develop. And if you've ever been to a DEF CON or Hope, I'm not saying they're bad events, but there's cliques. There's definite groups of people within the bigger group that kind of make it a challenge to get inside of and make it a challenge to interact with. So instead of having this massive pool of people that you can bounce ideas off of, like at this event, you know, it's a little more difficult to find those interactions, perhaps. And finally, I would like to argue that at smaller events, it's really easy to change something about the event if you hate it. I mean, one of the hallmarks about Nauticon that I find really pleasing is I'll get up at the end of the event, like they do here and at ShmooCon, and we'll say, okay, what was it that you liked? and people will tell us what they liked, or more importantly, what was it about our event or this event that really sucked so that we can change it for next year. When you get to an event as large as Hope or DEF CON or some of these other events, it's really hard to have your voice heard because your voice is just a small part of a very large picture. And so it's hard to really, make your opinion heard. Whereas I'm very keen on listening to everybody's opinions about the event that I throw with the help of many people, some of which are here, so that I can make the event valuable for you. And finally, kind of along the same theme as the first two, I find when I'm at an event like this, I'm more as part of a tribe of people. We all have similar interests. We might not have similar backgrounds or similar education levels, but I feel very comfortable going up to each and every one of you saying, hey, what is it you're into? Did you like my talk? Whereas when you're at such a large mass of people as DEF CON, it's easy to get lost in the crowd and to just become part of the mass versus a member of the community. Herding cats. One of the difficulties, though, in events like these, and I had a really good conversation with somebody yesterday about this, you have a really good time at PhreakNIC. You have, you meet a lot of great people. You drink a lot of really bad beer. You get really drunk. You have a lot of great conversations. Then you go home on Sunday night or Monday, and a lot of that energy and a lot of that information kind of starts to dissipate almost immediately. And it's a real challenge to try to keep the spirit of what you're doing alive after the event's done, because you have real work to go back to. You might have kids, a wife who isn't into computer hacking. Thank God I have one that is. But it can be a real challenge to keep that energy. And also one of the things that we identified is that when we leave this space, there's no longer a common medium of communication. When you're at an event like this, you have a lot of interpersonal communication. We could talk to each other right here. This is essentially one big, large party channel. Unfortunately, I'm the one speaking right now, so a lot of you can't respond back because you don't have microphones. But when the talk's over, we can all discuss things. But when we go off, when we go online again, we have IRC, we have email, IM, wikis, web pages, RSS feeds, mailing lists, news groups, forums, you name it, and all of the information and all of the energy kind of gets dissipated into all these other mediums. So whatever energy remains gets, diluted even more, making it more difficult to keep a lot of the things that we're talking about and a lot of the experiences fresh. I can think of many examples of where I've talked to somebody in an event and I've said, oh, wow, I really, I would like to collaborate with you or talk to you on this subject. And then I realize at the next year's event that, oh, wow, Hagee, yeah, I met you last year. We were going to talk and work on this one project, and what was your name? So it becomes a real challenge to try to, keep everything going. And I think it's really important that it does. But it does become difficult. And also, due to the community that we are, I think we have to admit that some of us have at least some issues with socialization and perhaps don't have all of the same relevant social skills that people not in our community have. It's hard if you're not used to talking to people to go up to somebody and say, hey, what are you into? Al is like the complete antithesis of this, although, Al might be overcompensating. I don't know. But it takes. I mean, for example, some of you might have a real hard time getting up in front of a room of people like this and talking. I have no problem with that, but I recognize that not everybody, has the comfort level to start a conversation or to meet somebody new, and that's kind of one of the difficulties in continuing things on. The way to achieve the way to start organizing things post-con, especially post-small con, involves leadership. And this applies not only to small cons, but perhaps user groups, projects, programs, whatever it is that you're into. Without leadership, I'm convinced that it becomes really difficult to attain anything of value. And there's a whole wide spectrum of leadership styles that can be put along this continuum, anywhere from anarchy, which I've gotten involved in some open source projects, and the whole organizational structure is basically, well, let's all decide what it is we want to do, and we'll figure out by maybe committee what it is, what features we want in the software, or we want to organize events, so let's all vote on this event and figure out how we're going to run it. An example of this that I know of is Ohio Linux Fest. Who here has ever heard of or been to Ohio Linux Fest? All right, a few of you. It's a great event. It's a lot of fun, but they organize basically by pure democracy, which sounds really great. Everybody gets their voice heard, but the problem is nothing happens because nobody is actually forced to be responsible for something. There's no hierarchy. So it's basically whoever wants to pick this up will do it, and boy, I hope we get everything done, because if not, we're really screwed. However, you get to the other side of things. There was a demo party in Utah, whose name I won't